Hello, ladies and gentlemen. There is a kind of pain that doesn't break a person. Instead, it acts like a bucket of ice water splashed directly into the boggodov.com face, shocking you out of your illusions. The crushing blow my husband delivered, right in the middle of his mother's 60th birthday banquet, accompanied by arrogant words, reeking of old money entitlement, was exactly that kind of icy shower for me. At the very second I lay on the floor, blood trickling from the corner of my mouth, I fumbled for my phone and made one secret call. This call didn't just change the course of the evening. It shattered the entire arrogant, snobbish facade of this family that flaunted their money and influence. The copper taste of blood filled my mouth. I had hit the edge of the banquet table hard, catching the corner of the heavy damask tablecloth. A wave of dizziness plugged my ears. Yet, through the ringing, I clearly heard the chatter and laughter of hundreds of guests suddenly fall silent. The luxurious setting of the Plaza Hotel's grand ballroom in New York City, the Devils, glittering light of crystal chandeliers, the quiet jazz quartet, it all suddenly seemed ridiculous and terrifyingly cruel. I lay on the cold marble floor, my silk evening gown, which I had carefully chosen so as not to embarrass my husband's relatives, was now crumpled and stained with red wine from an Igdaden's overturned glass. Standing right over me was none other than Max Maxwell. Sterling, the man I had called my husband for the last 3 years, he had just kicked me in the stomach with a foot clad in expensive Italian loafers shoes, had bought him for our anniversary, shoving me to the floor in front of a crowd of people. He didn't look at me with fear or pity. His face was purple from alcohol and rage. He was breathing heavily, pointing a finger at me, and behind his back stood Sylvia Sterling, my mother-in-law. With her arms crossed over her chest and her chin tilted high, she looked at me as if I were a stray dog that had accidentally wandered into an elite reception. She took half a step forward. The clack of her Manolo Blahniks echoed sharply through the silent hall. Leaning down, she spoke not with a screech, but in a low voice, hissing the words through her teeth, full of the contempt and ruthlessness of someone who possesses wealth. Scream, go ahead, cry louder for the audience's amusement. Our family has plenty of money in this city. Let's see who dares to go against us while you throw your tantrums here. A church mouse led into the manor barn still doesn't know its place. This phrase cut sharp as a scalpel, slicing my eardrums and destroying the last remnants of leniency I felt toward this family. Around us stood the guests, people in elegant tuxedos and designer evening gowns. Those who called themselves high society just stood and watched, and no one stepped forward to intervene. People were afraid of problems. Or perhaps they too believed that Sylvia Sterling really had that much money and real power. Why get involved in un vite trouble? I wiped the corner of my mouth with my hand, smearing the hot blood. My hand touched my small clutch, which had flown aside during the fall. The clasp had popped open. My phone had fallen out right at the edge of the table, half hidden by the hanging velvet tablecloth. I didn't raise my head to argue. Strangely enough, I wasn't crying. When I was knocked off my feet, I thought I would scream, that I would go mad with resentment. But no now, only an icy emptiness remained in my chest, the cold of brutal clarity. I huddled up, pretending to writhe in pain, slipped my hand under the tablecloth undetected, gripped the phone tightly, and pressed the power button. Face ID unlocked the screen, and I swiped through my contacts. On the first line was not an emergency service number, nor the name of some high-ranking official, but just a single word: Brother. I pressed call, pressing the phone to my ear, hidden by my disheveled hair. My lips barely moved, whispering the words so quietly only the person on the other end could hear. Vince, save me, the Plaza Hotel. On the other end, they answered after the first ring. No greetings. No unnecessary questions. Just a firm, icy male voice said, 15 minutes. Stay down and don't move. I dropped the call and lowered my hand, letting the phone slip back into the Preston shadows. I slowly opened my eyes, looking up from below at Sylvia, at Max, at all these self-satisfied relatives of my husband who looked at me like a pathetic loser. They thought I was afraid, thought I was so humiliated that I wouldn't dare get up. They didn't know that the real game was just beginning. While I lay there, counting every passing second, my entire past flashed through, my mind in slow motion. I asked myself why an educated woman with a good job, and, most importantly, a far from simple background like mine, allowed herself to fall into such a dark and humiliating abyss. My name is Eleanor. Nora. For short. I married Max when I was 27. To many, my marriage seemed like a great stroke of luck. Max's family was in Manhattan real estate, owned a small chain of upscale bistros, and a building materials supply company, considered quite wealthy in our New York circles. His mother, Sylvia Sterling, when going out into society, always draped herself in gold, carried Birkin bags, spoke loudly, and boasted of wide connections. Max himself was outwardly attractive and spoke softly. When he courted me, he seemed like a warm, understanding man, quite unlike the spoiled mama's boys of the Upper East Side. And I believed it. I believed in this quiet kindness. I believed in those moments when he brought me hot soup right to the office, when I was sick. I believed the sincerity in his eyes when he said, I don't care where you're from or what family you have. I only need you, my family. That was the secret I intentionally hid when entering this marriage. My husband's relatives always thought I was just a provincial girl from upstate New York whose parents dug in a garden in some godforsaken town, that I was just lucky to have pleasant looks, get a good education at NYU, become a PR department head, and trap their golden boy. In Sylvia's eyes, I was an upstart, a girl who got lucky for 3 generations forward just by crossing the threshold of their Upper East Side townhouse. They didn't know that my parents really did live in rural Pennsylvania, but only because after retiring, they wanted a quiet country life. And they certainly never knew that my own brother, whom I called Vince, and who worked somewhere out of state, was actually Vincent Vance, a high-ranking assistant director in the FBI, overseeing major organized crime and financial fraud divisions, a man whose very name caused cold sweat to run down the spines of semi-legal businessmen solving problems with bribes, like Sylvia Sterling's family. Why? Didn't I say anything? Why didn't I use my brother's status to force them to respect me? Because I was foolish enough to believe in pure love. Vince had ruffled my hair and lectured me very seriously before the wedding. Nora, you are entering a strange family. Be just an ordinary wife. Don't hide behind my name to scare anyone. If they respect you only because of my shadow, then when that shadow isn't around, they will betray you. You must see how they treat you personally. When you have nothing, that's when their true essence revealed. I listened to my brother. I hid my background. I wanted Max to love me for being Nora. I wanted my husband's family to respect me for my hard work, intelligence, and respectfulness. And not because they were afraid of my high-ranking brother. But I was wrong. That philosophy works only with decent people. But for those whose morality is measured by the thickness of a stack of bills, like Sylvia, my patience and modesty translated as weakness, insignificance, and a readiness to be used as a doormat. In the early days of my marriage, I tried to fulfill my duties to the point of absurdity. I got up at 6 a.m. to prepare green juice and breakfast for the whole family, and in the evening after work, I bustled about again, going to Whole Foods and standing at the stove. I didn't dare spend the money I earned on myself, but bought expensive supplements and imported caviar for my in-laws. Every time Sylvia veiledly ridiculed my parents for their poverty, I just lowered my head, swallowing the what insult, and told myself, Mom is already elderly. I'll stay silent for the sake of peace in the house. It will be calmer for my husband too. But this humility brought no peace. It became the very permission I handed them myself so they could trample me harder every day. Lying on the floor, I felt the pain in my abdomen pulsing in my brain. Max's kick not only caused physical pain, it shattered into smithereens the picture of a happy family with which I had deceived myself for so long. That man standing before me now, the one who had just played along with his mother and beaten his mother, wife in front of strangers, didn't do it in a momentary fit of anger. This was his essence, the result of a long process. I myself had indulged his cowardice. Guests in the ballroom began whispering again. The footsteps of running hotel security were heard, but they stopped abruptly, seeing an imperious hand gesture from Sylvia. I closed my eyes, counting every breath. I wasn't in a hurry to get up. I wanted to burn this feeling of humiliation deep into my consciousness, so that, in a moment, when everything flipped, I wouldn't allow myself to show weakness, so that not a single word of forgiveness would slip from my lips. 15 minutes. My brother said 15 minutes, and I would let this family enjoy the triumph of victors for another 15 minutes. Let's see. When their rich shell is torn apart, when the law knocks on their door, can all of Sylvia Sterling's money buy her repentance? In this game, I used to yield. But from this second, I am flipping the chessboard. I will collect every debt down to the last cent. I won't miss a single insult. Lying with closed eyes on the icy floor of the hotel, I felt the cold from the marble penetrating through the thin silk of my dress and running down my back. Memories of my first days in Sylvia's townhouse with its gilded gates suddenly flooded over me. They say marriage is the grave of love. But for me, it didn't become a grave. It became a perfect trap woven of sweet words and frightening hypocrisy. I remembered Max during our dating days, always in a pressed shirt, with a light scent of expensive cologne. He opened the car door for me, pulled out my chair, listened to my petty office stories. He often said, I grew up in a family of business people, saw from childhood how my parents fought over money. I dream only of an understanding wife and quiet family comfort. I don't need you to be rich. I only need you. It was these seemingly hard-won words that destroyed all the defenses of a girl who was strong at work but desperately craved a quiet harbor. But that mask flew off on the very first day of my life as a daughter-in-law. Immediately after the blank wedding brunch, when I was practically falling off my feet from fatigue after hours of smiling and greeting guests, Sylvia called me into the sitting room. She sat majestically on a carved mahogany sofa, took a sip of tea, and casually tossed a set of keys onto the table. She pronounced every word clearly, as if hammering nails into my ears. It is not customary in this house to leave the help overnight. At 6 a.m., you must get up and prepare breakfast for Max and for me. You'll figure out where things are. Kept yourself. Being a daughter-in-law in a wealthy family is not just dragging your suitcase in and relaxing. Back then, I looked at Max in the hope that he would say at least a word, just one word in defense of his wife, who had just crossed the threshold of his home. But Max sat buried in his phone. He scrolled the screen, monotonously moving his finger, pretending not to hear or see my confusion and pleading look. That was the first time I encountered Max's silence. Silence which, as I realized later, was not calmness, but the vileness and cowardice of a man accustomed to hiding behind his mother's skirt. The crack began to grow from the most insignificant trifles, but they were the ones that inflicted the deepest wounds. In this house, Sylvia always considered herself a representative of high society, although her elitism was built only on loud brand names and empty social gatherings. In her eyes, I remained forever a, quote, provincial girl, a mouse in a barn, trash, an ordinary gold digger. Once, my parents sent a box of produce from Pennsylvania, everything from their garden. Several free-range chickens that Mom fed grain herself, bundles of fresh herbs that Dad carefully watered, and a jar of homemade strawberry jam that Mom made especially for her son-in-law. Knowing he loved such things, I joyfully dragged the cardboard box into the kitchen, carefully taking out each bundle, with tears in my eyes from longing for home. At that moment, Sylvia returned from a spa salon. She walked into the kitchen, pinched her nose, frowned, and barked. "What is that disgusting stench? Do we have a dumpster here? Why did you bring this stinking garbage in here?" I froze, trying to hide my offense, and explained softly. "Mom and Dad sent some gifts from the country. Everything is organic. I'm going to roast a chicken now, so you can try it with us." Sylvia walked over, gingerly picked up a bag of herbs with 2 fingers sporting long acrylic nails, and flung it onto the tiled floor. She hissed through her teeth. Her gaze was sharp as a razor. "Organic. This junk grown in dirt, smelling of manure, is called clean. In this house, we have always eaten only products from elite gourmet markets, Wagyu beef, Norwegian salmon, and you want us to catch an infection from these yard chickens and pickles? Immediately take this out to the trash bins in the alley. God forbid this smell soaks into my slasted $20,000 Sub-Zero fridge." I felt my heart shrink. She called my parents' products their love garbage. I bent down, gathering the scattered herbs. Tears were ready to spurt from my eyes, but I held back. I called Max, hoping that when he returned, he would say at least a word to his mother to comfort me. But Max, having heard the story, just sighed, dragged me into the bedroom, and whispered, "Oh, come on. Mom has always been squeamish. Give it to the cleaning staff in our building. Why argue with Mother? In some ways, she's right. Who knows how they make farm products? These days, this invisible slap was more painful than a real one. A coward is not necessarily a villain, but a cowardly man will always use his wife as a human shield for his own weakness. From that day on, I never brought anything from my parents into that house again. I carefully hid everything. I remembered Vince's instruction: fulfill your duty as a daughter-in-law and see how they treat you, without loud titles. I did just that. I worked myself ragged at the PR agency, didn't rest during the day, and in the evening ran to the kitchen to cook complex dishes to please Sylvia. I paid the bills for electricity, water, and groceries from my salary. For every holiday, I bought Sylvia expensive gifts to please her. But the more I endured, the more impudent she became. She thought I had no voice. She believed my Hick family had no connections to stand up for me. My patience brought no proselyte recognition. It only turned me into a person easy to push around and trample in their eyes. And the scariest thing was that they not only trampled on my dignity, but also began to eye the money earned by my sweat and blood. Contempt for my origin was only the tip of the iceberg. Once they label you a freeloader, they begin to squeeze all the juice out of you to satisfy their greed and prove that you are obligated to pay for their beneficence. Despite the fact that Max's family were considered owners of restaurants, real estate, their business had long resembled a soap bubble, inflated on the sass, outside, but empty inside. Sylvia spent money mindlessly, buying handbags for tens of thousands of dollars just to brag about them at teas. Max was incompetent and failed one investment project after another. But they skillfully hid it, and I, a PR department head with a high salary and solid savings, accumulated over years of hard work before marriage, naturally became their li vis-a-vis. It all started in the second year of our marriage. That day, Max returned home with a dejected face and the smell of alcohol. He buried his head in my shoulder, playing the role of a man carrying too heavy a burden. He whispered, "Nora, our restaurant chain is short on working capital. Mom just pulled out money to pay off a loan for a commercial property uptown. And now we don't have cash to pay the rent for 3 locations this month. If we don't pay on time, they'll terminate the lease, and all the years of our family's hard work will go to waste." I asked, still feeling pity for my husband. "How much are you short, Max?" Hesitated. $250,000. Mom told me to take out a loan at a crazy interest rate. But I'm afraid for our family. Do you have savings to save me? Just for a month. We'll sell that property. I'll return everything to the penny with interest. I promise. I knew I had the money, but it was money earned by my hard labor, a financial safety net in case we decided to have a child. I hesitated. At that moment, the door opened and Sylvia entered. There was no trace of her usual arrogance left. She switched to a tender tone that made my hair stand on end. The voice of an actress playing out a family drama. "Nora, dear, I know you have your savings. You entered this family. Husband and wife are one whole. Right now the family is having a hard time. Help us. After all, in the future, this entire business will belong to you two. I'm old. I won't take it to the grave. Help, Max. I will never forget your merit." The words husband and wife are one whole, and the business will belong to you hit right at the weak spot of any woman desperately wanting to receive recognition from her husband's family. I blindly believed that if I sincerely helped them in trouble, they would look at me with different eyes and consider me one of their own. The next day, I went to the bank, closed my investment account for $250,000, and transferred it directly to Max's account. Receiving the notification, Max rushed to hug and kiss me. My wife is the best in the world. And Sylvia smiled and ordered the housekeeper to prepare an expensive dessert especially for me. It was the only time in 3 years that I was served something special, a dessert costing $250,000. But life is not a fairy tale where kind and sacrificial people receive a reward. Exactly a week after transferring the money, I received a bucket of ice water right in the heart. That day, I wasn't feeling well and asked to leave work early. Barely crossing the threshold, I heard loud laughter coming from the sitting room. Sylvia was hosting a high tea with her friends. Upper East Side, Socialite. I wanted to quickly go up to the second floor so as not to catch their eye, but their conversation nailed me to the spot. Someone's ringing voice was heard. "Sylvia, isn't your daughter-in-law in PR making huge money? I see she's been buying you such expensive things lately." Sylvia laughed, and her disdainful laugh cut the ear. "Oh, what huge money. She slaves away for pennies. She's only good at dressing. Up, where would she get money? Everything in this house rests on my Max. He spoils his wife, gives her pocket money, and she pretends that she is making purchases for the family. She's a hillbilly whose parents have been digging in the dirt all their lives. Where would she get hundreds of thousands? The fact that she hooked my Max is like a mouse falling into a barrel of butter. We dress her from head to toe. Without our family, she wouldn't even buy herself a pair of shoes." My ears rang. It felt like my heart was crushed in a vice. It shattered into small fragments. My $250,000, for which I didn't sleep at night, working on projects until I fainted and needed IVs. The money I gave a week ago to save the blank, pathetic face of this family, now in her mouth, turned me into a freeloader, sucking money out of her husband. She trampled my sacrifice to paint false prestige for her son. I sharply pushed the door and entered. The laughter in the sitting room instantly subsided. The mother-in-law's friends stared at me. Sylvia's face elongated for a moment, but then she jerked her chin up again, maintaining an arrogant look. "You're home early. Can't even say hello to the guests?" I didn't greet them. I walked straight to the second floor and slammed the bedroom door with force. That evening, when Max returned, I was sitting straight on the bed and looking at him with the coldest gaze I was capable of. I asked, directly, "The $250,000 I gave you, your mother told strangers that it was your money and I am a freeloader. How do you explain this?" Max froze, halfway through loosening his tie. He averted his eyes and clicked his tongue. "Oh, you've been listening to nonsense again. Mom was sitting with friends. She said it for status, so they would respect us. Why are you clinging to words? They're your money. I know they're yours. Isn't that good enough? Wife? Status." I grinned a dry, bitter laugh. "Your family's status has to be built on my humiliation? You allow your mother to spread rumors that I am a freeloader while you use my money to survive. What kind of man are you?" Max suddenly lost his temper. He threw his tie on the bed and barked. "Enough, already. Think about it. $250K, and you're acting like the mistress of the Porsche situation. You got married, live in luxury, drive a nice car, live in a townhouse. What have you lost to be so indignant?" "So," Mom said what she said, "did a piece of meat fall off you? Why are you making scenes here?" Max's words became the final hammer blow, smashing all my illusions about this marriage. I sat motionless on the bed, looking at the man in front of me like a monster. It turns out that in their eyes, my $250,000 was just a tribute I was obliged to pay. It turns out my humiliations were the price I had to pay for the right to be a daughter-in-law in this house. Something died in me that night. Patience died. Love died. I didn't cry anymore. They thought I was soft, thought I had resigned myself and given up. But they didn't know that when the boundaries of a quiet person's patience break, it turns into an invisible blade. And I began to sharpen this knife in my own, frightening silence. In this family, there was never a shortage of toxic theatrical scenes. And if Sylvia was the director, Max a bad actor, then Kendall, the sister-in-law, was a people chorus. Butcher knife always ready to strike the most vulnerable places. Kendall turned 25 this year. She studied fashion marketing in LA for several years, but never managed to get a degree and returned with suitcases to sit on the family's neck. She felt a strange pride in bearing the sterling name. Kendall was always decked out from head to toe in the loudest luxury brands, sprayed herself with perfume so that there was nothing to breathe. And in her eyes, I was not a sister-in-law, but a hindrance, a person not of her level, unworthy of breathing the same air as her. The peak of toxicity usually fell on Friday dinners when I, squeezed like a lemon after a work week, had to bend my back in the kitchen to prepare a luxurious dinner for the whole family. That day, I had just placed baked Chilean sea bass, Kendall's favorite dish, on the table. Before I could take off my apron, I saw Kendall pick at the fish with her fork with a face like she smelled sewage. She curled her lips and threw the place's cutlery onto the glass table with a sharp clatter. Are you cooking food for pigs? For sea bass to be tender, you need to monitor the temperature to the table. Second, what did you do to it? Why is it so dry and oversalted? Of course your peasant lineage is used to any old trash. Give you expensive ingredients. And you ruin everything. I froze, my hand holding the kitchen towel clenched. The fish was the freshest from Citarella. The baking time was ideal, spices in moderation. But for Kendall, criticizing food was not a matter of taste, but a habit, a need to feel her superiority. I looked at Sylvia. She was slowly slurping soup. The corners of her lips were raised in a self-satisfied half-smile. She didn't reprimand her daughter, but just indifferently dropped, "All right, eat what there is." Expecting a 5-star restaurant level from our kitchen is a bit difficult. The level of the cook here is known. What can you do? I shifted my gaze to my husband, the man who swallowed my $250,000 a few months ago. He was buried in his plate, chewing meat and not taking his eyes off the phone screen where a football match was streaming. Not a word of defense, not a glance of support. He didn't care that his mother and sister were tearing his wife apart right at dinner. Seeing that no one said anything, Kendall grew even bolder. She measured me with a contemptuous look from head to toe, stopping at my silk blouse. "You know, Nora, you seem to be a department head, but you dress like a hick from an outlet mall. You bought this shirt at TJ Maxx. When you walk next to Max, people think he's leading the help. The fact that you snagged Max is a gift from heaven to you. So be kind enough to at least dress decently so as not to disgrace our family." These words chopped at my self-esteem like a cleaver. Had I been the Nora of a year ago, I probably would have burst into tears, started making excuses, or run to the bedroom to sob into a pillow. But that day I didn't cry. A strange change occurred inside me. Intense anger suddenly thickened, turning into a block of ice. I threw down the towel. I pulled back a chair and sat opposite Kendall, with a straight back. Not touching the food, I just sat and looked straight into her face with dark, frighteningly calm eyes. I didn't utter a word. My silence became thick. It filled the entire dining room. Kendall was initially sassy, but, under my unblinking icy gaze, she became uncomfortable. She squirmed in her chair and began to stammer. "What are you? What are you staring at? Did I say something untrue?" Sylvia also stopped eating, frowning, looking at me. "Are you putting on a circus performance here? What is this attitude?" I still didn't answer. I slowly shifted my gaze to Sylvia and then to Max. In my eyes, there was no longer submission, no fear. It was the look of a person watching drowning people and unwilling to throw them a life preserver. Max shuddered, looked up, and met my gaze. He winced and hastily put down his fork. "Nora, what's wrong? Eat. Come on." I smiled slightly, with a dry smile that didn't reach my eyes. I stood up. My voice sounded calm, cold, and without the slightest tremor. "Since the fish is oversalted, don't eat it, or you might get sick. Bon appétit. I'm going." Having said this, I turned and left, rhythmically tapping my heels on the parquet floor, leaving them in complete bewilderment. They were used to my patience, used to my excuses or tears. My silence and cold smile that day didn't fit into their script. After that dinner, I changed completely. I no longer cooked breakfasts, citing a heavy workload. I only contributed my share for groceries and left it to them to order delivery or hire a cook. I didn't buy gifts for Sylvia, didn't buy things for the house. I transferred my salary to a new savings account with two-factor authentication. Seeing that I was silent, not arguing, and not complaining, they decided that I was finally broken. Sylvia boasted to relatives. The daughter-in-law had to be put in her place immediately. Now she's silky smooth. Does whatever I say, dares not make a splang peep. Max also sighed with relief, thinking that his wife had wised up and knew her place. They triumphed. They reveled in power, on their invented throne. They didn't understand that a wounded beast doesn't raise a noise. It hides in a burrow, licks its wounds, and sharpens its claws. My silence was not capitulation. It was preparation. I began secretly collecting evidence. I dug into files on Max's computer. When he slept a dead drunken sleep, I photographed all records of black bookkeeping, shadow loans, fictitious contracts, and evidence of tax evasion by their entire restaurant network. I made bank statements about the transfer of those $250,000, notarized all screenshots and documents. Everything, every dagger, every bomb was laid under the foundation of this family. I was just waiting for the right moment, a sufficiently strong spark to blow everything up at once. And that spark was the banquet on the occasion of Sylvia Sterling's 60th birthday. An evening she planned to demonstrate her greatness to the whole city, but which unexpectedly turned into a stage where the entire reputation of this family was buried. Time passed, and the fake elite facade of the family inflated more and more, directly proportional to the hidden debts weighing on Max's shoulders. But for a woman like Sylvia, who valued showing off more than life, even if the sky fell to earth, she would still go out on the street with the proud air of an aristocrat, and the best opportunity for her to throw dust in the eyes of the NYC business elite became her 60th anniversary jubilee. 3 months before it, Sylvia spread the news about the upcoming grand banquet through all parties and socialite high teas. She aimed for the Plaza Hotel, one of the most luxurious and expensive A place where just one step into the lobby smells of huge money, she demanded. The largest ballroom for 300 guests, decor of imported Dutch flowers, elite wine. And most importantly, every guest was to receive a memorable gift, emphasizing the status of the hostess. The problem was only that this status had to be paid for, not from her pocket. The restaurant business was going to the bottom. Landlords were evicting them. The properties Max invested in were stuck due to documentation problems. The family's cash flow dried up so much that Sylvia's credit cards were blocked several times for non-payment, but she didn't worry because she sacredly believed there is a gold mine in the house that hasn't been fully exhausted yet. It was me. That evening, Max entered the bedroom with a hesitant look, with an expression on his face that I already knew perfectly well. Every time he was about to beg for money, he played this performance. Max sat on the edge of the Jane. Rive Librevox / P's in T Brevox Prude. Bed began massaging my shoulders and spoke in a honeyed voice. Nora, next month is Mom's 60th Jubilee. It happens only once. Mom put so much effort into raising me. I want to throw her a grand celebration so she can be proud in front of relatives and friends. I was folding laundry, not raising my head, and answered indifferently, well, then do it. Take money from the restaurant revenue or your projects and pay for it. I'm not forbidding you. Max sighed theatrically heavily. The problem is that I dumped all the money into that industrial park development in Jersey. No luck yet. Cash is tight. Look, maybe you still have savings left. Allocate a sum for Mom's banquet. Show respect as a daughter-in-law. Serious guests will come, major partners. They'll give envelopes with money. We'll more than recoup all costs. Then I'll return the entire amount to you without loss. I promise. I grinned to myself. Again this song about filial duty. Again fairy tales about envelopes with gifts. An estimate of 100,000 for empty showing off. He wants me to pay for all this with my sweat and blood for the sake of his mother's fake reputation. Had I been the old me, I would have grit my teeth and given the money, afraid of being known as a stingy daughter-in-law. But now I looked at them as puppets, playing a spectacle on a stage built by me. I stopped, raised my eyes to Max. In my gaze, there wasn't a drop of emotion. I asked softly, 100,000. Correct. Well, you know my money is in a fixed-term deposit. If I withdraw it early, I lose interest. If you really need it, I'll withdraw it. But let's be honest. I am giving you this money as a loan for the organization of the banquet. This is not a gift from me. Hearing that I agreed to give $100,000, Max's eyes lit up as if he had found a treasure. He nodded, waving his hands joyfully. Of course, wife. A loan is a loan. Transfer it to me, and I'll pay for everything myself. You are the best wife in the world. Mom will be so proud of you. I smiled a smile that radiated frost. Proud. Sylvia will trumpet to everyone what a loving son she has. Shelled out thousands for a banquet for his mother, and I will again receive the label of a freeloader. But I didn't care. The very next day I transferred exactly $100,000 to Max. But in the payment purpose, I clearly wrote, not missing a single comma, loan to Max Sterling for the People.com, organization of Sylvia Sterling's Jubilee. I took a screenshot of the Place Lease Event transaction and neatly saved it in an encrypted folder. I wanted to see how far this family would go in their luxurious comedy. I will raise them to such a high pedestal, so high that they will think they did have reached heaven. And when I knock this support out from under their feet, the fall will break all the bones of their snobbery. In the following days, the townhouse buzzed like a hive. Sylvia invited tailors to the house, ordered 5 designer dresses embroidered with rhinestones. She ordered me to go choose flowers and invitations, but strictly forbade me to express my opinion on the Bardweiss seasoned design. What do you understand in the aesthetics of high society anyway? Just walk nearby and pay. That was her favorite phrase when we went together. I stood and watched as she paid with my card for expensive orchid compositions and bottles of French wine, the names of which she hardly knew how to read correctly. I was silent. My silence was frightening. I glided through this house like a ghost, watching them slowly but surely tighten the noose around their own necks. They spent my money, trampled on my self-respect, and believed that I was so stupid that I didn't notice anything. They didn't know that every dollar I spent was a death sentence for their false reputation. It seemed everything was going smoothly, according to the family's perfect script, until the very night before the banquet. It was a night of torrential rain. The autumn cold chilled to the bone, but it was nothing compared to that chilling horror I discovered right in my own bedroom. Max returned late after a drinking bout with partners. Dead drunk, threw his leather briefcase with documents on the sofa and collapsed onto the bed, snoring like a tractor. The briefcase was unzipped, and a stack of papers was sticking halfway out of it. I never pried into my husband's personal belongings, but that evening, as if a premonition worked, I walked over and pulled out the folder. The first thing that caught my eye was the bold heading, Real Estate, Mortgage Contract. I quickly flipped through the pages. My heart clenched, blood froze in my veins. The property offered as collateral was not a restaurant or his mother's commercial lot, but our spacious Manhattan condo. The money for the purchase of this apartment was 80% mine. Max added only a measly part. But, to save his face, I agreed to register it in joint ownership. And now, on the brooding Daisy/mortgage contract, with a shady hard money lender at a predatory interest rate, stood Max's signature and a fake signature with my name, Eleanor Vance scribbles, with which someone tried to copy my handwriting, but it came out completely clumsy. He intended to mortgage our home, bought with my sweat and blood to pay the endless debts of his rotten family. I held the folder in my hands, and they trembled not from fear, but from extreme disgust. I walked over to the bed and splashed a glass of ice water from the nightstand into Max's face. Max shuddered, coughed, and jumped up. He wiped his face. His red eyes stared furiously at me. Are you sick? Splashing water on? Your husband in the middle of the night. Where did you pick up such manners? I threw the folder right in his face. Sheets flew across the snow-white sheet. I crossed my arms over my chest, looking at him with a gaze sharp as a knife, and my cold voice echoed through the quiet room. Condo mortgage contract. My forged signature. Explain yourself, Max. You decided to quietly sell my apartment to pay off your mother's debts. Seeing the documents, Max instantly sobered up. His face turned from red to deathly pale. He awkwardly began to gather the papers, stammering. Nora, listen. It's not what you think. It's just a backup option. This credit office requires it. I wasn't planning to submit it yet. Thought I'd discuss it with you. Tomorrow, with a sober head, discuss. Discuss by forging my signature. You even put a fake fingerprint. And tomorrow, while the banquet is going on, you intended to quietly get the money. I grinned, taking a step forward, forcing him to press against the headboard. I gave you $100,000 for this pretentious celebration for your mother. $250,000 to save your rotten restaurants, and now you decided to take my home away from me. Are you a man or a monster, devouring people without a trace, Max? Realizing that he was exposed and shoved face first into the dirt, Max threw off the mask of a weak-willed husband, exposing his vile, authoritarian, and shameless nature. He jumped up, threw the papers on the floor, poked a finger at me, and yelled in a shrill voice, "Shut up! Don't dare talk down to me. The apartment is registered to me too. I have the right to mortgage it. Husband and wife share everything. If I go down, you will also be disgraced. Mom has no money. I am her son. If I don't take care of her, who will? You entered our family. You have duties." I looked at him, unflinching, unblinking. Duties? My duty is to bend my back to feed a bunch of parasitic bloodsuckers. Ah, so it's common property. And when your mother blabbered on every corner that I am a freeloader? When your sister insulted me, calling me a hick with no rights? When you stood and watched as your mother humiliated me, did you remember the words, husband and wife? Don't play the victim. Who are you anyway? Your parents are ordinary, retired, hillbillies. You married me. Entering this house, you received status, a Manhattan residency. In public, they call you Max Sterling's wife. Without our last name, you are just low-grade trash. Today, I'll tell you straight. You will voluntarily and amiably re-sign this contract, and tomorrow you will sit quietly at the banquet. And if not, blame yourself. I nodded. Excellent. Finally, the monster completely tore off the mask of the righteous man. I slowly bent down, gathered all the sheets, smoothed them out, and shoved them back into his briefcase. I looked at Max, and the creepiest smile possible appeared on my lips. Good. Keep these documents for yourself. Hide them better. And tomorrow morning, I will give your family the most unforgettable jubilee of their lives. Wait for it. Having said this, I turned and left the bedroom, leaving him standing in a stupor. I went to the living room, closed the door tightly, and picked up the phone. Opening contacts, I sent one night message. Vince, tomorrow at the Plaza Hotel. We act according to the plan. Having sent the message, I lay down on the sofa, pulled a thin blanket over my chest. Not a single tear fell from my eyes. My heart at that moment finally turned into stone. To those who were cruel to me, I will repay 100-fold. The price of betrayal must be paid with the blood and tears of the traitors themselves. The next day, the sky over New York was clear. The bright sun contrasted absolutely with the storm brewing in my soul. The Plaza Hotel Grand Ballroom was decorated to the point of absurdity lavishly. Right at the entrance, 2 rows of security guards in black suits stood along the red carpet lined with dozens of expensive baskets with imported orchids. On each basket, a red ribbon flaunted the inscription, "Long life to Mrs. Sylvia Sterling." Sylvia herself appeared in a velvet dress studded with thousands of rhinestones. On her neck was a necklace of pearls the size of grapes, A ring with a huge diamond sparkled on her finger. She puffed out her chest, held her head high, and laughed coquettishly with guests entering the hall. These were pot-bellied contractors, heavily made-up wives of businessmen, those whom she proudly called the elite. And I, dressed in an elegant silk dress, turned into nothing more than a servant. Despite the fact that I paid all $100,000 for this banquet, Sylvia did not allow me to stand nearby and greet guests. She waved her hand irritably, ordering, "Nora, why are you frozen here? Go to the kitchen, check how the crab cakes are coming along. Then go to the lobby, check if there are enough gift bags for all the guests. Move your legs. We don't feed you for nothing." I nodded silently and went to perform. I didn't argue, didn't show dissatisfaction. I was perfectly obedient. I wanted her to enjoy her fake power until the very last second, so that when everything collapses, the shock wave crushes her completely. Around 11 a.m., all tables were occupied. Suddenly, the atmosphere at the main entrance stalled slightly. I was arranging wine glasses and looked up. My heart skipped a beat, and a lump rose to my throat. My parents stood at the entrance. They were dressed very simply, modestly, but completely without pathos. Dad, in a white shirt and pressed trousers. In his hands, he carefully held a gift box, wrapped in red velvet. Mom was in a cream silk dress. Her hair was neatly gathered at the back of her head. They radiated the nobility and kindness of intelligent pensioners, but looked absolutely alien among this crowd decked out in gold and diamonds. God, I wanted to go over and meet them, but Sylvia was faster. She approached with an expression on her face in which falsity and contempt mixed. Such a greeting that just one look reeked of insult. "Oh, the in-laws arrived. And I thought you wouldn't be able to get out of your Pennsylvania. Sticks with your gardens. Must have shaken on Amtrak. Probably tired. Oh well, you arrived and you arrived. Why drag gifts? This box probably costs like several sacks of your potatoes, no less." Sylvia spoke so loudly that neighboring tables could hear. Snickers were heard. Dad didn't change his face, retaining a calm smile, and handed the box with both hands. "You're joking, dear relative. Today is your holiday. We brought you a gift from the bottom of our hearts, from the country. We wish you health and prosperity." Sylvia casually took the box with one hand and immediately handed it to a waitress standing nearby, saying ringingly, "Here, take it. Put it in that corner over there. Don't put it together with gifts from our important guests. They might mix it up. It will be trouble." I stood 10 steps away, heard every word, and saw every movement. My hands clenched into fists so hard that nails dug into my palms until they bled. I endured this humiliation dozens of times, but today she dared to publicly insult my parents in front of hundreds of people. And Sylvia didn't stop at that. She beckoned the hall administrator. "Come here, girl. My in-laws love silence. Seat for them at table number 25, in that corner where it's quieter, so they can talk." Table number 25. It was a table at the far end of the hall, right next to the blanks, toilets, and the corridor from where waiters wheeled out carts with food. It was a table where the restaurant usually seated personal drivers and staff of rich guests. Sylvia intentionally humiliated my parents, the people who gave me life. Seating them at the staff table, my parents said nothing. They knew the relative's character And for my sake, afraid to put me in an awkward position on the day of my mother-in-law's celebration, they nodded silently and went into that dark corner. Max stood with a glass near the VIP table. Seeing his wife's parents, he only nodded from afar and turned away, pretending that it didn't concern him. I stood rooted to the spot. The crystal chandeliers swirled before my eyes. The anger I had held back with my composure suddenly flared up into a furious flame, burning out all remnants of reason and patience. Finally, I took a deep breath. The cold air burned my lungs. I adjusted the hem of my dress, raised my head high, and walked with firm steps toward the central VIP table, where Sylvia was already preparing to take the microphone for a speech. I had played the role of an obedient daughter-in-law long enough. Now it's my turn to become the director of this bloody spectacle. The cup overflowed. I will let this flood wash away this entire miserable family, leaving not a wet spot behind them. The quiet music in the hall gradually subsided, giving way to the sycophantic voice of a professional host hired for huge money. The light of the crystal chandeliers dimmed slightly. All lighting focused on the stage, covered with a red carpet. Sylvia, in her sparkling velvet dress, with a self-satisfied smile that deepened the wrinkles in the corners of her eyes, majestically ascended the stage. Almost 300 people in the hall burst into applause simultaneously, saturated with the flattery of those who waited for an opportunity to grab a piece of the imaginary glory of Max's family. I stood in the shadows near a champagne pyramid. Dropping my arms along my body, my gaze was rivetingly fixed on Sylvia. I didn't even look at Max, who lounged imposingly at the first VIP table. My gaze was directed only towards table number 25. At that table by the toilets where my own parents sat huddled, among drivers and staff, Dad was still smiling gently, putting food on Mom's quart plate, and Mom lowered her head, now and then furtively dabbing the corners of her eyes. They were hurt, but they endured for fear of ruining my holiday. Pain twisted my chest, became thick, suffocating, and then gradually remelted into unquenchable rage. On stage, Sylvia took the microphone, cleared her throat, and began her speech, which she herself had rehearsed for a whole month. Esteemed guests, dear partners, today, on the day of my 60th birthday, I am deeply touched by your presence. All my life, my main wealth was not the chain of restaurants, not real estate, but my precious son, Director Maxwell. She pointed her hand at Max. He stood up, buttoned his jacket, bowed, and smiled, smugly. The hall exploded in applause again. Sylvia continued. Her voice trembled with excitement. My Max is young and talented, and his filial duty knows no bounds. This entire grand banquet, from the most expensive imported orchids to these exquisite wines, he paid for all. This out of his own pocket. Planned everything to please his mother. Having such a son, I feel like the happiest woman in New York. Whispers and sighs were heard from neighboring tables. Oh, what a good boy Max is. Sylvia is lucky. Such a big business. And the son is so caring. It's rare nowadays. I listened to these praises, and my lips themselves twisted into a pardon d'été, contemptuous smirk. $100,000, my sweat and tears. Those nights when I didn't sleep preparing PR projects until nausea, now turned into the personal money of this gigolo, and became a source of pride for his greedy mother. But if she stopped only at appropriating merits. Perhaps I would have kept silent until the end of the evening and saved my mortal blow, the fake mortgage contract, for later. But no, the arrogant nature and habit of Sylvia Sterling to wipe her feet on others didn't allow her to stop. She wanted to use her luxury to humiliate the poor and exalt herself. And her target to my pain became my parents. Sylvia threw a sharp glance to the end of the hall, to where table number 25 was, lost. She pretended as if she suddenly remembered something and said loudly into the microphone, "Ah yes, taking this opportunity, I want to greet my in-laws, too. Despite the long journey, despite the fact that they are from the remote sticks, where year-round they only dig in the dirt, they still came on Amtrak to join our high society. And this is very valuable. I always tell my daughter-in-law, the fact that you married a rich man and entered our family is incredible happiness. So be kind enough to behave in such a way as to be worthy of our care. Don't disgrace your parents in the country. Do you agree with me, gentlemen, that I am raising my daughter-in-law correctly?" The hall froze for a second. Awkward snickers were heard. Some looked back with curiosity at table number 25. Dad froze. The smile on his lips froze. Mom put down her fork. Her face flushed with humiliation. They were exposed to ridicule, made a springboard for Sylvia's cheap boasting before 100 strangers. Last thread of patience in my brain broke. I no longer saw glittering chandeliers, didn't hear the music. Only the image of my mom's trembling shoulders and the extreme vileness of Sylvia and Max remained in my head. I put the tray with glasses on the nearest table and walked with firm steps toward the stage. The sound of my sharp heels on the marble floor echoed with a rhythmic steel echo. It tore apart the atmosphere of the hall that was beginning to become awkward. Seeing that I was suddenly walking toward the stage, Max frowned. He jumped up, intending to grab me by the hem of my dress. "Nora, where are you going? Get back to your place right now." I didn't even honor him with a look. I threw off his hand with force and walked straight up the steps covered with red carpet. Seeing me on stage, Sylvia flashed her eyes irritably. She tried to cover the microphone with her hand and hissed, "What are you doing here? Get out of here right now." But I was faster. I snatched the microphone right out of her hands in front of the stunned hall. Standing in the center of the stage, in the rays of spotlights, I raised my head high, looking at the whispering crowd. I brought the microphone to my lips. My voice was not shrill or crying. It was clear, cold, and authoritative enough that all sounds in the hall instantly quieted down. "I apologize, ladies and gentlemen, for interrupting such a touching speech by my mother-in-law. She just said that this luxurious banquet, every blade of grass and every glass of wine, is paid for out of the personal pocket of her precious son. Correct?" I paused, gliding my gaze over Max's face, which was rapidly acquiring an ashen hue, and then looked at the dumbfounded Sylvia. But I'm afraid my mother-in-law's memory has deteriorated with age. She forgot one little detail. All $100,000 spent on this banquet, from renting the hall and flowers to tips for waiters, were transferred from my personal account. Eleanor Vance, the very daughter-in-law whom she just called a mouse in a barn. I don't believe it. I took my phone out of my pocket, holding up the screen, high with a bank receipt and a clear payment purpose. I have all the bank statements. How funny when a family calling itself elite, claiming to have benefited me, is forced to beg for money from a provincial daughter-in-law to throw dust in people's eyes. And even funnier when these people, living off my sweat and blood, stand on this stage and use a holiday bought with my money to humiliate my own parents. The hall exploded. Hundreds of shocked looks turned to Sylvia. Whispers and finger-pointing buzzed like a disturbed hive. Oh my God, so it's the daughter-in-law's money. They say they are ears deep in debt. Where do they get money for such banquets? Turns out they live off the wife, sponge off her, and still dare to humiliate the in-laws. What kind of people are they? Sylvia's face turned from gray to crimson like blood. Her chest heaved from anger and shame. Her luxurious facade was torn off in broad daylight. It was like she went mad. She rushed at me, intending to snatch the microphone, but I stepped back, dodging contemptuously. The play reached its climax, and the great as Tussaud monsters, hiding under elegant costumes, could no longer play the role of decent people. Sylvia's disgrace on stage worked like a spark thrown into a powder magazine. Unable to snatch the microphone, she screeched, losing all appearance of a noble lady. You trash? You dare slander me in front of guests? Where is security? Drag this crazy woman off the stage, but hotel security didn't have time to react before Max flew onto the stage from the hall like a maddened beast. He couldn't bear the fact that his dignity was trampled in front of business partners. The fact that he lived off his wife and used her money for showing off was a dirty secret he always wanted to hide. And now it rang out over the powerful sound system of the venue. The punctured bubble of false pride turned Max from a weak-willed, henpecked husband into a crazy bully. Max flew up the steps. His face was contorted from alcohol and rage. He rushed forward, waved his hand, and forcefully knocked the microphone out of my hands. The microphone hit the wooden floor with a loud, piercing squeal, forcing the whole hall to cover their ears. Max didn't stop at that. He grabbed my shoulder with his thick fingers, digging into the skin as if wishing to crush the bones. He gritted his teeth. His intermittent breathing with the sharp smell of alcohol hit me right in the face. Shut up. Decided to stage ascended. Rebellion? You've disgraced my family enough, trash. Now get out of here. I desperately tried to tear my hand out of his grip. I looked straight into his bloodshot eyes, not a bit frightened. My voice was sharp as a blade. Without a microphone, but loud enough for the front rows to hear. Disgraced? Do you even know what disgrace is, Max? You took my $100,000 for this banquet, $250,000 to save your leaky businesses, and it's still not enough for you. Last night you intended to use deeds to my condo, forged my signature to mortgage it to black market lenders. What right does a scoundrel like you have to even pronounce the word disgrace in my presence? My words plunged right into Max's weak spot. His dirty secret with the fake mortgage, revealed now, made him completely lose control. He realized that I knew everything, and I wouldn't leave him a way to retreat. The fear of a cornered beast activated his basest animal instincts. Max didn't let me go. He swung his free hand and slapped me across the face with a backhand swing. Smack! A ringing, dry slap echoed through the frozen air of the banquet hall. From the strong blow, I staggered. My head rang. The salty taste of blood immediately appeared in the corner of my mouth, but Max didn't stop. The madness of an exposed coward demanded to destroy me. Immediately, to shut my mouth. While I staggered, trying to keep my balance, Max stepped forward and rudely kicked me with his pointed loafer right in the stomach. The ruthless blow knocked all the air out of my lungs. My body was thrown back. I completely lost my balance. I tumbled down the steps of the stage. My forehead hit the edge of a VIP table covered with red velvet hard. Sharp pain pierced my head. Everything went dark in my eyes for a few seconds. My silk dress caught on the leg of the table, overturning a tray with red wine. Crystal glasses shattered into smithereens, shards sprinkled across the tiles. Dark red wine poured right onto my dress, spreading in a huge stain, horribly similar to blood. The whole hall gasped in horror. Hundreds of people jumped up. Chairs moved back with a rape legend. Clatter. From the depths of the hall, I heard my mother's heart-rending scream. "Nora, baby daughter, oh God, why are they doing this to her?" Through a veil, I saw my parents trying to break through the crowd to me. But they were harshly pushed back by tall hotel security guards used to obeying only those with money. Dad shouted and struggled, but the strength of an elderly man was insignificant against tough guys. Mom sobbed in despair, stretching her hands towards me. And the guests, all these representatives of high society, whom Sylvia was so proud of, began to back away. No one, not a single man, in an expensive suit, stepped forward to help me get up. Not a single woman in diamonds raised her voice in my defense. They only whispered, keeping a safe distance, as if afraid of getting dirty with the mud of this cruel family showdown. In the world of money, compassion is a luxury no one wants to carry around. I lay curled up on the icy floor. Blood from my split lip dripped, mixing with red wine on the floor. Pain in my abdomen and the abrasion on my forehead shackled my body. But strangely enough, at this moment of extreme humiliation, my mind was clear and cold as never before. The last remnants of pity for this family were knocked out of me by Max's blow. My handbag was lying nearby at the prostended very edge of the hanging tablecloth. I knew my phone was there. Above me, footsteps were getting closer. Max stood breathing heavily, with an expression on his face in which fear and aggression mixed, and Sylvia was slowly descending the steps. Her heels arrogantly tapped out a rhythm. She didn't care if I was alive or dead. She approached to bring down on my head the final threats of a person confident in the power of her money. She didn't know that this very arrogance was pushing her straight into a death trap that was about to slam shut. I lay on my side, holding my aching stomach with one hand, and slipped the other, unnoticed under the red velvet tablecloth. Shards of crystal bit into my skin, but I didn't care. My view was partially blocked by disheveled hair, but I clearly saw Sylvia's expensive shoes stopping half a step away from me. "Ah, you uncultured trash. Thought you'd yelp a couple of times and I'd get scared?" Her voice sounded above my head. There was no panic of an exposed woman in it. On the contrary, the ruthless calmness of someone used to buying truth with money. She leaned down, looking at me like a crushed cockroach. "Think your tricks with statements and public scandal will ruin our family? What a naive fool you are. All guests here know who we are. Today, you made me lose face, and I will make you pay for this 10 times over. Your money? Consider you paid tribute for the right to bear our last name. Try suing if you have enough courage." She rested, her hands on her hips, tilting her chin up, swept her gaze over the crowd, holding its breath, and hissed through her teeth again. Scream. Go ahead. Cry. Louder for the audience's amusement. Our family has plenty of money in this city. Let's see who dares to go against us while you throw your tantrums here. A. Church Mouse led into the manor barn still doesn't know its place. Max, call security. Let them throw this crazy woman and her hick parents out of here. We'll lock the doors at home, and I'll teach her a lesson myself. I heard every word she said. These threats, reeking of money, no longer angered me. They seemed just funny to me. The limit of arrogance is stupidity. And Sylvia reached its peak. My hand under the tablecloth felt the phone. The screen glowed dimly. Face ID unlocked it. I swiped my finger and pressed the first. Contact, brother. As soon as the first ring sounded, I pressed the phone to my cruisend, ear hidden by hair. Vince, save me. The Plaza Hotel. 15 minutes. Stay down and don't move. I dropped the call, hid the phone back under the table. An icy but powerful flow of energy ran down my spine, spreading throughout my body, displacing the pain. 15 minutes. The countdown timer for this family has started. I slowly leaned my hand on the floor. I didn't need anyone's help. Staggering, I stood up and wiped the blood in the corner of my mouth. The silk dress soaked in. Dark red wine stuck to my body. I probably looked absolutely pathetic, but when I raised my eyes and looked straight at Sylvia and Max, there wasn't a drop of submissiveness in my gaze. It was quiet, deep, and deadly, like a frozen lake. Seeing that I got up myself, and there were no tears in my icy eyes, Sylvia was slightly taken aback. Her authority seemed to stumble over my gaze. She took half a step back, cleared her throat to regain composure. What are you staring at? Get out of my sight. I didn't retreat. I took a step forward. The distance between us shrunk so much that I felt the suffocating smell of her cheap perfume, mixed with hypocrisy. I grinned. My voice sounded quiet. I didn't shout, but the tone was so icy that those standing nearby shivered. Plenty of money, you say? No one will dare go against you? I shifted my eyes to Max, who stood like an axa, idle. His hand with which he hit me still trembled slightly. And then I looked again into Sylvia's eyes, in which panic began to emerge. Mom, enjoy your wealth and power for another 15 minutes. Take a good look at this $100,000 banquet. Look at the guests staring at you, because in 15 minutes, I'm afraid, your family won't have money left even for a torn bedsheet. What? What are you babbling about? Who are you trying to scare? She barked, but intermittent notes appeared in her voice. Former power evaporated. She turned to her son. Max, why are you standing rooted to the spot? Hit her again, so she comes to her senses, and drag her out of here. Hurry. Hearing his mother's order, Max awkwardly stepped forward, intending to grab me. But one sharp look and a creepy half-smile were enough for me. Just try to touch me, with even one more finger, Max. Touch me one more time, and I promise, your hands that forged my signature last night will never be able to hold anything in, and life again. My threat from a woman who had just been beaten should have sounded pathetic, but the absolute cold in every syllable nailed Max to the spot. A coward's instinct told him that the woman in front of him was no longer the submissive wife she was before. An aura of deadly calm emanated from me, and he couldn't understand its reason. I no longer paid attention to them. I turned away and slowly walked towards table number 25, where my parents were still trying to break free from the hands of security to rush to me. Guests automatically parted, clearing the way for me. No one dared bar the path of a woman in a blood-stained dress, with a gaze sharp as a blade. I approached my parents, hugged my trembling mom, took Dad's calloused, anger-clenched hand. I smiled at them with a genuinely warm smile intended only for them. Mom, Dad, don't be afraid. Everything is fine with your Nora. Just stand here and watch your daughter restore justice. I took out a paper napkin, wiped the blood from my lips myself, then turned and stood silently in the corner of the hall. I stood there like a judge, awaiting the hour of executing the sentence. My silence covered the entire restaurant, turning the atmosphere of a luxurious holiday into oppressive silence. Such frightening silence that happens before a destructive hurricane hits the shore. And the clock on the wall continued to count down 15 fateful minutes. Time in. The Plaza Ballroom stretched strangely, thickly, and so suffocatingly that one could hear the heavy breathing of guests at the front tables. I stood next to my parents by that very inconspicuous table. 25, near the restrooms. Mom was still gripping my icy hand tightly. Tears rolled down her cheeks, furrowed with wrinkles. Dad, a man who worked on the land all his life, lived honestly and modestly. Now his chest was heaving heavily, and his knotted hands clenched into fists. He hated himself for not being able to rush at that bastard, son-in-law, who beat his daughter because he was held back by burly guards. But, most of all, he was restrained by my calm gaze. I gently stroked Mom on the back and whispered quietly so only they could hear. Dad, Mom, believe me, it will end soon. Vince is coming. At the mere mention of brother's name, the trembling in Mom's body subsided. A ray of absolute calm flashed in Dad's eyes. My parents knew perfectly well their son's status. They also knew those principles which our family always kept secret. We never used power to pressure people. But if someone dared to use money to trample on our family's dignity, the price for that would never be measured in banknotes. I swept my gaze over the stage. Unlike the frightening silence in my corner, there Sylvia was desperately trying to save the remnants of her rotten prestige. She constantly waved her hand to the manager, loudly giving orders. Music! Play the symphony louder. Where are the waiters? Quickly clean up this mess from the floor. Pour fresh wine for the guests. She tried to put on the Fannie Mae cable mask of a powerful hostess, pretended that the slap and her son's blow were just a small incident in the process of educating a rebellious daughter-in-law. The professional host, catching her eye, took the microphone and smiled gently. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, quarrels happen in every family. We are serious people, respected guests. Let's not pay attention to annoying trifles and raise glasses to Sylvia Sterling's health. Liquid and scattered applause rang out from a couple of sycophants, but most guests in the hall were silent. They weren't fools. People capable of earning enough money to sit in the VIP zone were cunning foxes in business. They perfectly understood that something was seriously wrong with this family. My accusation about the $100,000 and especially the words about the forged signature on mortgage documents sowed a huge seed of doubt in the minds of her partners. I saw how some guests quietly took out phones and typed messages, probably ordering their subordinates to recheck all contracts and debts of Max's restaurant chain. Max himself, meanwhile, returned to the VIP table. He drank a huge glass of wine in one gulp. His shirt was wrinkled, his forehead covered with perspiration. That slap and brutal kick seemed to have sucked out the last drops of bandit courage from him. Now, heavily collapsed on a chair, he now and then looked at his watch. His eyes darted quietly. Probably, he was trying to calm himself with the fact that I am just a provincial without connections who would never in life defeat such a rich and powerful family. But he was wrong. Catastrophically wrong. I wasn't going to cry, wasn't going to scream or throw a tantrum like weak women do, because I understood. Tears before an enemy are the cheapest currency. Screams and scandals only devalue you, putting you on the same level with this trash. My silence at that moment was the cruelest psychological torture. I stood with dried blood on my lips, in a dress stained with dark red, like blood, spots of wine, and looked at them with an empty, icy gaze. Time passed. Minute after minute. The ticking of a huge grandfather clock in the one father clock hotel lobby seemed to knock right on my eardrums. 10 minutes. Sylvia began, walking between tables, raising a glass and laughing, but her smile was twisted and her gaze now and then furtively glided in my direction. Leaving, and wasn't making a scandal. Her initial arrogant confidence began to be replaced by a sticky feeling of anxiety. 12 minutes. Several guests. At distant tables began to find urgent matters. Stand up, apologize, and hurriedly leave. They sensed danger. They didn't want to be drawn into this swamp which was about to explode. Sylvia tried to hold them back, but unsuccessfully. 14 minutes. I closed my eyes slightly. My heart beat slowly and steadily. I gave all my youth, my patience, money, and strength trying to get along with this family. I waited for at least a drop of love from the husband I chose, but in the end, I received only a kick in front of a crowd. Excellent. When kindness is trampled into the mud, resistance becomes a sentence without right of pardon, and exactly on the 15th minute, through the symphonic music that tried, unsuccessfully, to return the atmosphere of luxury, a piercing, cutting sound suddenly came from the street, tearing apart all false shells of this banquet. It was not an ordinary car horn. It was a rising, sharp, and authoritative howl of police sirens. Not one car, but a whole convoy that was rushing at enormous speed, and with a screech of brakes, stopped right in front of the wide entrance to the plaza. The sound was so loud that the music in the hall instantly drowned in it. Hundreds of guests simultaneously stopped eating and speaking, fixing their eyes on the huge panoramic windows facing the street. Outside, red and blue strobe lights flashed continuously, casting icy, alarming reflections through the glass directly onto the faces of this fake elite pale from shock. I slowly opened my eyes, and a slight sneer appeared on my lips. Without condescension, without a drop of pity, the storm has officially begun. The atmosphere in the banquet hall was no longer just suffocating. It froze, turning into a gigantic block of ice. The siren howl subsided, giving way to the growl of engines and sharp, clear slamming of car doors. Guests sitting by the windows jumped up, pressed their faces to the glass, and then recoiled in horror. SWAT! There are a bunch of police cars and patrol cars and vans with special forces There, blurted out some pot-bellied director in a breaking voice. His words became a spark thrown into dry straw. Panic instantly arose in the hall. Those whose snouts were down in the fluff, shady dealers who usually beat their chests, drinking at the same table with Max, began to cover themselves with cold sweat and look around worriedly in search of an exit. Sylvia, holding an unfinished glass of wine in her hand, hearing the word police, dropped it. The glass slipped out of diamond-studded fingers, broke with a crash on the floor, and her face turned from crimson to deathly pale. She stared in absolute horror at the entrance. Max was completely paralyzed on his pastor chair. The legs with which he recently kicked me were now shaking so much that he couldn't even stand up. He cast a glance at me in the corner of the hall, then again at the door, probably trying in his head to link the appearance of this powerful police squad with that provincial wife he had just trampled into the mud. The hotel's revolving doors swung open. Icy air burst from the street into the hall, instantly blowing out the smells of expensive perfumes and luxurious food. The first to enter the hall with a clear, measured step were FBI, tactical agents in full gear with weapons at the ready. They didn't shout, didn't make noise, only absolute silence and overwhelming formation. They instantly blocked all exits from the hall. Security, waiters, guests, everyone froze in dumb stupor. No one dared to cough or take an unnecessary step. The greatness of the law manifested itself so clearly that even the most arrogant snobs lowered their heads in fear. Between the ranks of the tactical team that cleared the path to the center of the hall, a man walked with a firm, wide step. It was my brother, Vincent Vance. He was not in uniform, but in a strict tailored suit, white shirt with unbuttoned top button, without a tie. But the aura emanating from him, an FBI assistant director in charge of the New York field office, a man who went through fire and water, crushed hundreds of criminal groups, created such colossal pressure that the air seemed leaden. His angular face and deep, cold as razor blade eyes glided over the crowd like a herd of straw scarecrows. Several VIP guests who had serious weight in neighboring states, barely looking at Vince, felt their legs buckle. They recognized him. Frightened whispers crept through the hall. "Oh my God. Assistant Director Vance, head of the New York FBI office. Why did he come here personally? What crime did Sylvia Sterling's family commit?" Vince paid no attention to anyone's glances. He walked with the speed of an approaching hurricane, but neither to the stage nor to Sylvia's VIP table. He headed straight to the dark corner by the toilets where I stood with parents. The crowd automatically parted, forming a wide corridor in front of him. When he stopped in front of me, his icy, cruel aura suddenly disappeared. His bleak gaze, seeing the dried blood on my lips, bruise on my forehead, and dress flooded with wine, suddenly became bloodshot. It was the extreme rage of an older brother who doted on his little sister, and Blackett Town now saw her in such a miserable state. Vince didn't say a word. He tore off his dark jacket and threw it over my chilled shoulders. His big, rough hand gently wiped the remaining blood from my chin. His voice was muffled, restraining a volcano ready to erupt at any moment. "I'm late. Forgive me. Little sister. Does it hurt much?" I shook my head, nose treacherously stung. In front of the crowd, in front of husband's family, I was an indestructible block of ice. But in front of brother, I became a little sister again. I answered quietly, "It doesn't hurt. I was just waiting for you to arrive to clean up all this garbage. Vince nodded. He slightly embraced Mom's trembling shoulders and firmly shook Father's hand. Mom, Dad, calm down, I'm here. From this day on, not a single soul in the blank before the world will dare force you or Nora to shed a single tear. Having said this, Vince slowly turned. His look completely changed. Tenderness disappeared, giving way to a deadly beam hitting straight at the VIP table where stunned Max, Sylvia stood. Pressure in the hall dropped below zero. Hundreds of people held their breath. Vince's voice rang out without a microphone, but it was rolling, heavy, and hitting right on the eardrums of everyone present. I asked, "Which of you made my sister bleed?" A short question. Not a single curse word. But it felt like the power of a supreme judge, a man holding the right to execute pardon in his hands. Dead silence stood in the hall. Hundreds of pairs of eyes simultaneously turned to Max. Max had no blood left in his face. He trembled, clutching the edge of the table so as not to fall to his knees. The truth that, opened to his eyes, was beyond the understanding of such a narrow-minded coward as he. The provincial wife, the girl whom he and Mother called a mouse in a, quote, barn, turned out to be the sister of a man before whom even those high-ranking officials to whom his family brought bribes fawned. Sylvia looked no better. Her legs in designer shoes were buckling, the image of a rich, influential socialite that she built all her life suddenly became ridiculous and laughable in the face of real power. But the arrogant, cunning nature of a huckster ate into her blood, forced her in a state of extreme horror to try to squeeze out a crooked smile. She decided to use her flattering tongue to save the situation. I didn't know that the last nail in the coffin lid of her family is just preparing to be driven in. Sylvia, staggering, leaned on the back of a chair, trying to stay on her feet. Despite panic and cold sweat soaking through a thick layer of makeup, she tried to save remnants of face. She swallowed and, squeezing out a miserable, unnatural smile, took several uncertain steps forward. Mr. Assistant Director, there must be some misunderstanding here. I am Sylvia Sterling, owner of a restaurant chain. I am well acquainted with Chief Peterson from the precinct, with officials from City Hall. Max and his wife just have a small quarrel, ordinary family conflict. Why call so many people? Don't rush. Let me explain everything. She tried to use an old trick name, a couple of names of officials to whom she once brought envelopes on holidays as a talisman. But Vince didn't even honor her with a look. He stood in the middle of the hall like a rock, thrusting hands into trouser pockets. His eyes were riveted only to Max. Family. Conflict. Vince grinned with an icy, frightening smile. He took one hand out of his pocket, adjusted the cuff of his white shirt. His voice was calm, but every word choked those standing before him. Let me introduce myself again so it's clearer to you. I am Vincent Vance, Assistant Director in charge of the FBI New York Field Office and the own brother of Eleanor, the woman your son just hit in the face and kicked in the stomach. The fact that he raised a hand against a member of my family, we will discuss with him later, man to man. And right now I stand here, not to deal with your family affairs. Having said this, Vince nodded toward a group of FBI white-collar crime investigators awaiting orders behind. 4 officers in agency jackets immediately stepped forward. In their hands were thick folders with documents. They headed straight to the VIP table where Max and Sylvia stood. At this moment, I stepped out of the shadows. I threw back the broad lapels of brother's jacket and stood shoulder to shoulder with him. From my purse, I took out a tiny silver USB flash drive and raised it high. I looked straight into Max's eyes. My voice sounded clear and firm. You thought I endured your family so long because I was afraid. No, Max. I was silent to collect enough garbage that you hid for so long. Statements on movement of those $250,000 that you lured out of me to launder, money through your restaurant chain mired in debt. Here are all shadow loan, agreements at predatory interest rates, and fraudulent schemes of your real estate company with which you deceived clients. Max's face turned from pale, gray to ashen. He stared at the flash drive in my hand like a time bomb. I took another step and threw the flash drive straight into his chest. It fell onto the table with a quiet click. The sound was microscopic, but it finally destroyed the psyche of this pathetic coward. And most importantly, I raised my voice so that all hundreds of guests clearly heard. I filed a report for initiating a criminal case on the fact of forgery of documents, seals, and my signature on the elite condo mortgage contract. Yesterday night you wanted, hiding behind the status of husband, to sell my property, steal what is earned by my sweat, to pay your mother's debts. You thought the law is a toy for your family. My words were like a mortal blow with a sword. The hall gasped. In their whisper there was no longer curiosity, only disgust and desire to disown, forgery of signatures, real estate mortgage. God, they are bankrupts, deceiving their own wife. Thank God I didn't sign a contract with her for that lot yesterday, or I would have been left with nothing. Hearing words fraud, forgery of signature, criminal case, Sylvia finally lost strength. A thick layer of makeup couldn't hide her complete collapse. She fell to the floor with a heavy thud. The sparkling velvet dress rustled pitifully on the marble. All arrogance of the Raystons socialite evaporated without a trace. She was breathing heavily, opening her mouth like a fish thrown ashore. Tears and snot-smeared cosmetics, clutching the leg of the table with her hands. She couldn't utter a word in her defense. At this moment, an agent approached and unfolded a document with a red seal in front of Max and Sylvia. The officer's voice sounded like a verdict. Federal Bureau of Investigation. This is a warrant for arrest and conducting an emergency search in your family's company, as well as persons suspected of wire fraud, theft of property, tax evasion, and forgery of federal documents. Citizen Sylvia Sterling and Citizen Maxwell Sterling, we demand you immediately proceed with us to the field office to give testimony. At the moment when the warrant was read, Max finally broke down. The mask of a Prujan, respectable director, shattered into dust. Truth was revealed. The law knocked on the door. Absolute power of wife's family crushed his psyche. Max's legs gave way, and he fell to his knees with a dull thud. A man who just 20 minutes ago arrogantly kicked his wife in the middle of a crowd now crawled on cold floor. He crawled on all fours in my direction. His face twisted. He sobbed in 3 streams, looking disgustingly pathetic. Nora, baby, I beg you, forgive me, Max howled, stretching hands, trying to grab my ankles. I know I'm guilty. I was wrong. The devil confused me. I was an idiot. For the sake of 3 years of our marriage, Put in a word for me before Vince. Take back the statement. Nora, you want... I'll give everything to you. All apartments, everything I'll sign over. To you. I will beg forgiveness from your parents on knees. I will be slave of your family. I beg you. I don't want a prison, Nora. I stepped back, disdainfully dodging his dirty hands. My gaze directed at him contained not a drop of pity, only disgust. I looked down at man crawling at my feet. This pathetic picture I will forever save in memory, as a reminder of price of my stupid patience in past for sake of our marriage. I repeated these words and grinned bitterly. When you allowed your mother to humiliate my parents, did you remember about our marriage? When you intended to mortgage my apartment, did you remember about our marriage? And when you kicked me until I bled in front of hundreds of people, did you remember about our marriage? I bowed head. My cold voice sounded like final verdict. Max, you once asked me. You married me. Live in luxury. What did you lose? Today I answer you. You and your whole family prepare to lose rest of your life behind bars, in disgrace. Don't beg me, because law doesn't accept apologies from scumbags. I turned and walked to Prize. Vince, ignoring Max's heartbreaking wails. Pathetic pleas of Max and Sylvia echoed behind my back. Most luxurious jubilee in New York eventually turned into ideal funeral, burying snobbery of this family. Silence in hall became so thick and heavy that one could distinctly hear every convulsive sobbing breaking out from throat of one who just couple tens of minutes ago proudly stood on pedestal. Max stood on knees, both hands clutching hem of his wine-stained silk dress. His once groomed face was now distorted by grimace of extreme horror. Tears and snot flowed mixed with hail of sweat. He looked at me from bottom up with bloodshot eyes, begging like beaten dog waiting for scraps from owner whom it bit itself. He repeated his pathetic pleas time after time. Nora, I beg. I know I'm wrong. Hit me, curse me, but please, don't let him take me away. Mom is old. She won't survive such shock. We are husband and wife after all. One day together, memory for whole life. How can you watch me rot in prison? I promise. Just take back statement, and I'll sign everything over to you. I will beg forgiveness from your parents, on knees. I will work like a dog for you. I stood motionless, lowering eyes, onto man whom once loved with all heart. How funny. Memory for whole life, when you hit me in face. When you kicked with your boot in stomach in front of hundreds of guests. Where was this memory? When your mother stood on stage and, with most poisonous words, insulted my parents. Where was this memory? Cowardice of Max caused nausea in me. Man who only knew how to hide behind mother's skirt and live on wife's money, finding himself face to face with law and punishment, hid behind status of husband and old mother like shield. I grinned slightly with icy smile chilling to bones. I wanted to kick away his dirty hands from myself with foot, but at this moment, huge shadow stepped out from behind my back and blocked view. It was Vince. My brother silently bent down, grabbed by collar of expensive shirt of Max with his huge, hard as steel hand. With superhuman strength, he tore whining man off floor and threw him several meters back. Max rolled on shards of crystal of broken glasses, screaming loudly, but dared not squeeze out word of abuse from himself. Vince approached. Toe of his black patent leather boot stopped right in front of Max's face, shrunk from fear. His cold, piercing gaze radiated aura of man who encountered most notorious criminals. You just dared speak about memory and duty? Do you have right to pronounce these words? Coward? On day when I entrusted my sister to you, I said, very clearly, I didn't need you to ensure her life in silks. I needed only one thing, for you to treat her humanly, with minimal respect worthy of man. What did you promise? What did you swear? You thought that your fake position of director, cheap elite shell of your family would be able to blur my eyes? I already secretly investigated illegal business, fraudulent schemes and tax, evasion of your office. I was silent and didn't give course to case because waited how you would treat Eleanor. I wanted to leave you way to retreat, chance to change mind, become normal husband, and get out of this swamp. And what did you do? You sucked out her savings to save your trash dump. You allowed your mother to trample her dignity. Yesterday night you dared forge her signature, deciding to take away roof over head, which she earned herself. And today, right here, you dared raise hand against her, and together with your mama insulted my parents. Listen here, Max. Men are different. There are poor ones. But with sense of own dignity, there are rich ones. But knowing measure, and such type as you, living at expense of woman, but liking to let loose hands, venting cowardice on wife in my eyes. You are worse than animal. Don't dare open mouth and beg. Your tears now cause in me only even greater disgust. Every word of Vince was like blow of sledgehammer on rotten conceit of Max. Dead silence stood. In hall, guests, those very people who recently raised glasses and flattered Max, now sat with lowered heads, afraid to breath loudly. They became witnesses of complete collapse of nouveau rich family. Max lay on floor, curled up into ball. He was shaking. He opened mouth to say something, but overwhelming aura of Vince deprived him of speech. He could only grab head and sob. In distance, Sylvia long lost consciousness. 2 police officers picked her up under arms, waiting for ambulance. Miserable end of woman upstart, who all life was arrogant, and found joy in humiliating others. Now, repayment was truly bitter. I stepped forward, slightly patted Vince on shoulder, giving sign to step back. I wanted to finish this dirty tangle myself. I approached Max. Seeing me, he raised head. In his eyes flashed last faint spark of hope. Hope for softness of woman who once loved him. But he was wrong. My softness died together with his blow. I bent down, grabbed him by collar and jerked him up so that he looked straight into my eyes. Crack. Deafening burning slap fell on left cheek of Max. My hand turned red and burned, but I didn't stop. This slap is for those $250,000 out, of which you deceived me to save your pathetic family. Crack. Second slap even, stronger and tougher, fell on right cheek. Max's head threw back. Blood flowed from lip. This is for humiliation which my parents had to endure when your mother made them laughing stock on stage, because you stood and watched how people who gave me life are trampled into mud. I took deep breath, concentrating all bitterness, all resentment for 3 years of blind youth, all remaining strength in my hand. Crack. Third slap. So strong that Max flew onto floor, ears rang. Gaze became glassy. And this last one is return for your kick Return for all those years when I foolishly believed, stupidly endured, and sacrificed myself for such inhuman scumbag like you. From this second, everything is over between us. We will meet only in court, at division of property. And also, I will watch how you sit in prison to pay for all your sins. I released his collar and straightened up. My chest heaved heavily, but in soul suddenly became surprisingly easy and calm, as if 100-kilogram shackles which I dragged many years were removed from neck. Agents approached. Cold metallic clank of handcuffs sounded. Steel bracelets closed on those very hands that forged my signature and beat me in face. Max was raised under arms and led away. He barely moved legs. His once solid figure shrunk and looked pitiful like crushed earthworm. Sylvia was loaded onto ambulance stretcher, accompanied by 2 police. Cars, business, reputation, money, freedom, everything family was proud of and boasted before world was taken away clean in one fateful afternoon. I turned. Mom rushed to me, hugged and wept bitterly. Dad embraced both of us. His eyes turned red. Calloused hand softly patted me on back. Voice became hoarse. Everything is over, daughter. Everything is behind. Let's go home. We are here, and no one will dare offend our girl anymore. Vince approached, picked up his Baitenu jacket from floor and again threw over my shoulders. He smiled most warm, brightest smile of all that I saw. Let's go, Nora. Police will cordon off crime, scene, and finish work. This banquet is over, but your new life just begins. I pressed head to brother's shoulder, tightly squeezing hands of parents. Together, we turned, and with firm step, with high raised head left banquet hall of plaza, crowd around automatically parted. In glances of those seeing us off, there was no longer either contempt or pity. Passing through glass doors, we went out under bright rays of sun. Wind fluttered my hair, carrying away smell of fake perfume. And all that bitterness of humiliations that I endured all this time. I took deep breath. Air-filled lungs. Sky today was so high, so blue, truly free. In subsequent days, events developed rapidly and ruthlessly, like tornado, sweeping through New York. Sylvia Sterling's Jubilee turned into ironic legend, discussed in business circles and in every alley. From noble lady who every morning went out with branded bag to tease, Sylvia turned into name flickering in criminal chronicles. Fall of family from summit of Olympus into abyss of justice became iron proof of proverb. Law of boomerang hits everyone, just to someone it arrives later. Investigation went full speed, and darkest dirty secrets of their business empire surfaced. Case was not only in forgery by Max of my signature on mortgage documents for sake of profit. During investigation, whole network of financial schemes, illegal attraction of funds, and appropriation of money of dozens of trusting investors was revealed. Those construction projects Max boasted so much turned out to be ghost projects, never receiving permits. Luxurious restaurant chain of Sylvia was mired in non-payment of taxes, debts on salary to employees, and use of counterfeit products. Brilliant facade they built, with such difficulty, flooding with money to blind surrounding, exploded, exposing, rotting pile of garbage. Assets of family were immediately frozen and seized to ensure investigation and compensation for damage. Townhouse on Upper East Side. which Sylvia so boasted bank took for debts. Seal was hung on door. Shiny. Foreign cars and collections of expensive jewelry were confiscated. This whole family, once relying on power and money, wiping feet on other people's dignity, remained with nothing without cent in pocket. 2 months after events in Plaza I Proces, received summons to city court for divorce proceedings. That morning, fine rain drizzled. I put on elegant white business suit, gathered hair into strict bun, made light makeup. I entered courthouse building not like pathetic victim, but like woman fully controlling her life. I met with Max in room for reconciliation of parties. That very sleek, arrogant man now looked exhausted, aged 10 years, short-cut hair, sloppy beard, deeply sunken eyes, with black circles from sleepless nights in detention center, waiting for trial. Dressed in prison robe, he sat with lowered head. His hands, shackled in handcuffs, trembled on cold wooden table. When judge read conditions of divorce and division of property, Max didn't object. Actually, there was nothing for him to object. Investigation proved elite. Apartment was purchased with my personal funds. Fabricated mortgage contract was annulled. $250,000 that I once transferred to him, part of 8, were also recognized as personal debt of Max. Although I understood with his colossal debts, chances to return this money are negligible, but for me money now didn't matter. I needed sharply cleanly and finally break all ties with this trash. Nora, hoarsely pronounced Max, breaking silence when I took pen to sign. Documents? He raised eyes to me, and in this miserable look read belated repentance. Forgive me. I was fool greedy idiot who listened to mom. I lost best wife in world. I so regret, Nora. Regret? I stopped writing and looked straight into his eyes. In my heart there were no ripples, neither anger nor pain, only absolute cold. You regret because chose wrong victim for mockery. Regret because didn't expect I'd have enough strength to fight back and drive you into this dead end. Don't dump everything on Mother Max. She is cruel. This is her essence. But you are coward. You raised hand against me. You forged my signature. It was your choice. Lousy man, even without mommy's instigations, will it still find way to destroy woman next to him. I lowered eyes, and with sharp firm flourish put signature on decision on divorce. My handwriting was clear and decisive. Punishment law prepares for you and your mother no longer worries me, and my personal punishment for you consists in fact that rest of your days you will spend in torments, observing from behind bars how I live happily, brightly, and successfully, and understanding you will never be able to reach me again. I stood up, nodded to judge, took handbag and turned to exit, never looking back. Metallic clank of handcuffs sounded behind me, merging with muffled sobbing of miserable man. But these sounds forever remained behind doors of courthouse hall. I went out onto street. Rain ended. Sun rays broke through gray clouds, warming wet asphalt. I breathed deeply, feeling fresh and free air filling lungs. After everything experienced, I moved parents to New York. They began to live with me in an apartment, which now was completely cleared of any traces of past. Brother Vincent, despite busyness at service, every weekend came to us for dinner. At our family table, there were neither crabs nor French wines for thousands of dollars, only homemade meatloaf and mom's soup. But behind it, laughter always sounded. Respect and genuine love reigned. My career went uphill. Having Recovered from psychological shock, I invested all energy into work, from department head promoted to creative director of agency. New horizons opened before me, and major projects which earlier trying to be ideal daughter-in-law I had to refuse. Many ask me, having survived such nightmare marriage, didn't you lose faith in love and men? I only smiled and shook head. I didn't lose a faith in anything. I just learned deep truth which earlier forgot. Us women from very birth teach sacrificial and patience. We are hammered into head. Humility is. Virtue need to take step back to preserve peace sake of husband, children, and calm and family need to endure any injustice. We think our submissiveness and devotion will buy us love and recognition of husband's family, but truth is in toxic relationships, your patience never brings you respect. It is perceived as license issued by you to continue to be impudent, wipe feet on you, suck out all juices both morally and materially. When you lower self-esteem to please others, you yourself remove protective armor. Patience makes sense only when it is directed at those who know how to appreciate it, and for those who perceive your kindness as weakness and your sacrifices as your direct duty. Only thing need to do is build steel boundary. Need to give them to understand, yes, you can be good, wife and caring daughter-in-law. But first of all, you independent person, possessing dignity, value, and claws to protect yourself when necessary. Never lose yourself because of failed marriage. Never allow lousy man devalue life. Gave you your parents. Money can lose, earn again. House can give, bank, build new. But if your self-respect trampled into dust glue, it will be very difficult. Don't be afraid. Stand up. Give, fight back. Don't be afraid. Receive label. Divorcee. Evil tongues. Gossips sharp as knives. But they won't be able to cut thread of your life if you yourself don't allow them. Remember, behind collapse of rotten marriage hides not abyss door to new life, where you have full right self, build happiness. I am Eleanor. I stumbled. I was trampled into mud. It hurt so, much wanted drop hands, but I stood up. Self threw off shackles, stupid patience, and using mind-cold calculation, returned justice, self-family. Today I live high, head not borrowing peace from anyone. Hope my history become alarm. Call word, support for those women still locked dark corners. Tragic marriages. Be strong, wipe tears, remember you worthy respect. Real strength always lies own hands. Thank everyone who reads story and wish everyone peace, inner strength, let fire. Self-respect always burns hearts. Goodbye till new meetings following stories.